Jada, I love you. G.I. Jane 2, can't wait to see it. All right? That was a nice one. Okay. I'm out here. Richard. Oh, wow. Wow. Will Smith just smacked the shit out of me.
For years, Will Smith was untouchable. He wasn't just a movie star. He was the movie star. The one studios bet their biggest budgets on because everyone loved him. He was funny without being crude, emotional without being messy, and charming without ever trying too hard. Parents trusted him, kids looked up to him, and Hollywood practically built whole eras around his name. From Men in Black to Independence Day, from Bad Boys to The Pursuit of Happiness, Will Smith didn't just headline blockbusters, he defined them. He was the blueprint for success, family values, and good energy all wrapped into one. But then, something shifted. Not in a single moment or scandal, but slowly, quietly, one crack at a time, until the picture-perfect image started to crumble right in front of the world. What makes Will Smith's fall so shocking isn't just what happened, but how fast it happened. A man once seen as Hollywood's moral center turned into a meme, a headline, and a walking controversy that nobody could stop talking about. The turning point came when the world got an unfiltered look into his personal life. When Jada Pinkett Smith went public about her entanglement with singer August Alsina, it wasn't just a messy rumor, it was deeply humiliating. Not because relationships can't get complicated, but because the entire situation was played out in public, stripping Will of his privacy and dignity in real time.
Hey everybody, I just wanted to talk about something really important. Earlier this year, I was hired to be a performer on a major tour with somebody who is huge in the industry. So I was excited, proud of myself for getting the opportunity. Unfortunately, some things happened, and I can't get into the details of exactly what that was, because it's already a legal issue right now. But the reason why I'm speaking out about this is because
suddenly, the man once known for grace and composure became a symbol of heartbreak, confusion, and unwanted exposure. Something he never asked to be. Suddenly, the internet stopped laughing with Will Smith. It started laughing at him. Memes took over every feed, clips were replayed endlessly, and people analyzed every frame of his face. The awkward smiles, the strained body language, the uncomfortable red table talk moments. Every detail fed into a narrative that tore down the confident image he had spent his entire career building. Even then, many still felt sorry for him. Until that night at the Oscars changed everything. That slap wasn't just a mistake, it was a cultural earthquake. Watching Will Smith walk on stage and strike Chris Rock live on global TV didn't look powerful. It looked like a man losing control under impossible pressure. In seconds, his polished image shattered before millions of eyes. Overnight, he went from Hollywood's golden boy to someone people didn't know how to defend anymore. But that moment wasn't even the end. Because just when everyone thought the internet had already seen Will Smith's lowest point, something much more serious began to surface, quietly through paperwork, not gossip, legal filings, real accusations. Late last year, a video started circulating online that most people completely overlooked. It wasn't dramatic, it wasn't viral. It came from musician Brian King Joseph, a professional violinist who had reportedly worked on Will Smith's upcoming tour project.
Getting fired or getting blamed or shamed or threatened or anything like that simply for reporting sexual misconduct or safety threats at work is not okay. And I know that there's a lot of other people out there who have been afraid to speak up, and I understand. And if that's you, I see you. And that's pretty much it. More updates to come soon.
In that short clip, Brian spoke with care. No direct names, no loud accusations. Just uneasy hints. He mentioned being mistreated, feeling unsafe, and facing harassment while working with someone powerful in the entertainment world. At first, no one paid much attention. He wasn't a major influencer, and without saying names, his message disappeared in the noise. But then, just weeks later, everything changed. As the new year began, court documents went public. Brian King Joseph had officially filed a lawsuit against Will Smith and Trey Ball Studios. Smith's own production company. And this time, the accusations were spelled out clearly. According to the filing, Brian had been hired in 2024 to join Will's 2025 tour project. Early in the process, he claimed Will started showing an unusual level of personal interest. Not mentorship, but intense personal focus. Private talks, one-on-one moments, constant reassurance about how special their connection was. At first, Brian allegedly thought it was an incredible opportunity. A superstar taking interest in his work felt like a dream. But behind that dream, something darker might have been forming. A side of fame no one expected to see exposed this way. But over time, that attention started to feel wrong. According to the lawsuit, things between Will and Brian shifted fast. Boundaries that should have been clear allegedly blurred until the energy no longer felt professional. Brian says he began to feel emotionally and professionally isolated from everyone else on the team.
You see the hundreds of celebrities that I've done business with, and things with. And during the latter years of our relationship, Will was not my friend. I was his friend. I could tell you what goes on the inside. Everybody else is just speculation. And then I saw facts that when I walked in on.
Who'd you walk in on?
Him and Dwayne Martin. Door to Dwayne's dressing room, and that's when I see Dwayne and having sex with Will. There was a couch, and Will was bent over on the couch, and Dwayne was standing up, killing, like murder. It was there.
Like he was being cut off on purpose. Things reportedly escalated during a tour stop in Las Vegas in March 2025. Court filings claim that when Brian returned to his hotel room, a room booked and managed by Smith's team, something immediately felt off. Nothing appeared broken or forced open, but the space looked disturbed. Earlier that same day, Brian's bag, which held his room key, had allegedly gone missing under the tour management's supervision. Inside the room, he says he discovered several unsettling items that didn't belong to him. A red backpack, disinfecting wipes, a beer bottle, hospital discharge papers with someone else's name, and a bottle of medication labeled for another person. But what shook him the most was a handwritten note left behind, addressed directly to him. It read, "Brian, I'll be back no later than 5:30. Just us," followed by a small heart underneath. Brian said he took that message as a threat, a warning that something was expected of him, something he never agreed to. Panicking, he called hotel security, reached out to the local non-emergency police line, and contacted Will Smith's representatives. Security footage was reviewed, and according to the lawsuit, there was no sign of an outside intruder. Instead, the video allegedly showed members of Will Smith's management team entering and leaving his room throughout the day. When Brian brought this to the team's attention, the response, he claims, was not concern. It was denial. He says he was accused of making things up, ridiculed, and soon after told the tour was moving in a different direction. He was replaced. In his lawsuit, Brian claims this wasn't a coincidence but retaliation, that the entire situation followed a manipulative pattern designed to test boundaries, pressure him, and then discard him once he resisted. He also says the emotional toll left lasting damage, anxiety, trauma, and ongoing distress. Will Smith's legal team fired back immediately, calling the allegations completely false, reckless, and baseless. They made it clear they plan to fight every claim in court, and that's where the story sits for now. Because this case doesn't exist in isolation. It connects to whispers that have long floated around Hollywood, stories about power, access, silence, and unspoken rules behind the glittering image, patterns that the industry has ignored for decades, until now. With this lawsuit public, the old rumors suddenly sound a little too familiar, a little too close to home. The internet did what it always does when a major name gets tied to serious allegations. It started digging. And quickly, people realized this story wasn't standing alone. Brian King Joseph's claims didn't sound random or disconnected. They felt eerily familiar, especially to anyone who's been paying attention to the entertainment industry lately. The first comparison people jumped to was the situation involving Sean Diddy Combs. Not because the details are the same, they're not, but because the pattern looked strikingly similar. In both cases, you've got a powerful figure in the industry, a younger creative brought into their world with promises of opportunity, private access, blurred lines, and then when things go wrong, silence, denial, and a quick removal from the inner circle. That's what made Brian's lawsuit hit harder than anyone expected. In his filings, he doesn't just describe unprofessional behavior, he calls it manipulation, slow and psychological. The kind that starts with charm, validation, and attention, not threats. It begins with someone saying, "You're special," and creating a false sense of safety. That's what made people stop and pay attention. Because it didn't fit the old Hollywood stereotype of obvious abuse of power. It looked like something more calculated. Brian claims that the Las Vegas hotel incident wasn't an accident or misunderstanding. It was a test, a moment to see how far he'd go, how quiet he'd stay, whether he'd give in or push back. And when he pushed back, he says the response was immediate. The door shut and his career move ended. What really unsettled people is how familiar Will Smith's legal response felt. The same tone we've seen before: calm denial, polished statements, no acknowledgement of harm, just the standard legal wall of defense. To be clear, these are still allegations, not verdicts. No one has been proven guilty or innocent. But even with that, the conversation isn't stopping. Because this lawsuit didn't appear out of thin air. For years, whispers about Will Smith floated through Hollywood, rumors long brushed off as gossip. But now, they're getting harder to dismiss. One resurfaced in late 2023 when a man claiming to be a former assistant went on record saying he saw Will in an intimate situation with actor Dwayne Martin. That interview spread fast, not because it sounded scandalous, but because it was presented as first-hand testimony. Will's team quickly fired back, calling it completely false and motivated by money. Both Will and Jada publicly called it nonsense. But something about their reaction caught attention. Not because it was harsh, but because it sounded too familiar. The same calm, practiced tone that other Hollywood figures used right before their stories took darker turns. Smooth, confident, and meant to make the public move on. But this time, people didn't. Instead, the spotlight shifted backward to Will's climb to fame, his transition from rapper to movie star, and how extraordinary that rise really was. Before Hollywood crowned him its golden boy, Will Smith was already a hitmaker in music, someone who knew how to reinvent himself, play the game, and dominate every room he entered. But now, people are asking if that control extended beyond the camera, and if the image we all believed for decades was just one part of a much more complicated truth. The Fresh Prince was everywhere. Will Smith had conquered music and television, becoming one of the most recognizable faces on the planet. But behind the fame, he's admitted that he wasn't exactly smart with his money. He spent fast, lived big, and didn't think long-term. And soon, everything came crashing down. His music stopped charting, his next album flopped, and worst of all, the IRS showed up. Will has been open about how they seized his assets, leaving him in a brutal position. Famous, but broke. In an industry built on image, that kind of humiliation cuts deep. That moment changed everything because it made him vulnerable. And in Hollywood, vulnerability often comes with a price tag. That's when Benny Medina entered the picture. Benny wasn't just a manager, he was a power broker, a man who could turn nobodies into household names. He had access, connections, and influence in rooms where real decisions got made. And right when Will needed a lifeline, Benny reached out. Benny Medina introduced Will Smith to the legendary Quincy Jones, and that meeting flipped his entire life upside down. According to Will himself, Quincy didn't even make him wait for a formal audition. He had him read for the Fresh Prince of Bel-Air on the spot, at a party. Within hours, Will went from broke to booked, from desperate to destined for stardom. It was a Hollywood fairy tale. Or at least that's how it looked on the surface. But over the years, whispers have followed that moment like a shadow. Rumors suggesting that the biggest doors in Hollywood don't always open because of talent alone. That sometimes deals and favors are exchanged quietly, behind the glitz. Now, there's no proof that anything inappropriate ever happened between Will and Quincy, none at all, but people have speculated for decades, especially given Quincy's massive behind-the-scenes influence. And when you add Benny Medina's own history into the mix, the story gets even murkier. Medina has faced multiple accusations over the years related to misconduct. One case was even filed in the early 2000s, though the accuser tragically passed away before the case ever finished. Those unresolved stories have kept Benny's reputation under a cloud. And in hindsight, people can't help but wonder what kind of world a young Will Smith was really stepping into back then. A world where opportunity and control sometimes walk hand in hand. Another actor, Jason Lee, publicly came forward in 2008 accusing Benny Medina of misconduct after a private event. Again, these are allegations, not proven facts. But when the same names start surfacing in different cases, tied to power, fame, and influence, it's impossible for people not to notice the pattern. When you see that repetition, when the same people who build stars are also connected to controversies, it stops feeling like coincidence. It starts feeling like a system. That's the uncomfortable truth that a lot of insiders whisper about. Hollywood isn't just an industry that rewards talent. It's a machine that runs on control, access, and silence. And in that machine, the ones who survive often end up playing the same game they once swore they'd never be part of. It's not always about money or fame. Sometimes it's about what people are willing to ignore just to stay inside the circle. That's why Brian King Joseph's lawsuit against Will Smith has shaken people to their core. Because he's not describing one bad night or a misunderstanding. He's painting a picture of how power actually works behind the scenes. A process that doesn't rely on open threats, but on subtle manipulation, validation, and slow conditioning. His story has resonated because it doesn't sound like the usual Hollywood scandal. It sounds like something deeper, like someone finally describing the invisible walls that keep so many silent. Will Smith's team, of course, has denied every single accusation. Their statement was sharp, confident, and direct, calling the claims false, reckless, and malicious. And legally, that's where the story stands right now. The court will decide what's real and what's not. But culturally, the fallout is already happening because Will Smith isn't just another name in Hollywood. He was the example, the idea that you could rise to the top without losing your humanity. The movie star who stood for family, inspiration, and clean success. The man who made parents proud to let their kids watch him. When that image cracks, even a little, it shakes people. Because Will Smith represented something different from the darker side of the industry. He wasn't supposed to be part of those rumors. He wasn't supposed to have this kind of story attached to his name. So now people aren't just questioning the allegations. They're questioning everything they thought they knew about him. The marriage, the silence, the tension, the anger that's been spilling out in public over the last few years. Fans are rewatching interviews, reading old quotes, dissecting every uncomfortable moment, wondering if it was always right there in plain sight. Because sometimes, when the truth starts coming out, everything that used to look random starts to make sense. Those awkward smiles at the red table talk, the unfiltered emotions, the outbursts, all of it begins to feel like the pressure finally bursting through the cracks. And even if the legal case never makes it to trial, Will Smith's public image might never fully recover. Because in the era of the internet, perception is reality. You don't have to be convicted in court to be convicted in public opinion. Once people decide you've fallen from grace, there's almost no going back. The pedestal he once stood on, the global respect, the admiration, the automatic trust, is gone. The public doesn't see the same man anymore. But this isn't just about Will Smith. That's what makes the conversation bigger. It's about what his story represents, about how power moves inside Hollywood and what happens to people when they challenge that system. Because Brian King Joseph's lawsuit isn't only about one celebrity's alleged actions. It's about how many others have been trapped in the same situation but stayed quiet. It's about how fear of losing everything keeps people silent. Some industry veterans say this is the cost of fame. That once you step into those elite circles, everything becomes transactional. Trust, loyalty, even safety. But others see it differently. They see it as proof that Hollywood has operated under the same unspoken rules for decades, where reputation matters more than truth, and silence is rewarded. What's striking is how similar the cycles are every time. A powerful name, a vulnerable creative, private access, blurred boundaries, then denial and damage control. It's a pattern that's repeated too many times to ignore. And even though Will's team insists that none of it is true, people have already made up their minds to look closer. Because patterns, not words, are what change minds now. And that's why the conversation about accountability keeps growing louder. Because people aren't just talking about Will Smith, they're talking about the entire industry that made him untouchable for so long. The same industry that's protected other powerful figures until it was too late. Some fans say this could be another turning point, like the reckoning that reshaped Hollywood a few years ago. Others think it might fizzle out, drowned in statements and legal jargon. But no matter what happens in court, the perception battle is already lost. Even those who defend Will admit that his image will never be what it once was. He'll always be remembered as the man who went from Hollywood's golden boy to its most complicated figure. Because once a public figure becomes a symbol of controversy, the story doesn't fade, it evolves. Every new project, every interview, every post becomes part of that same narrative. Still, some people argue that the situation shows just how fragile fame really is. One moment you're everyone's hero, and the next, you're trending for all the wrong reasons. And in Will Smith's case, it's especially painful because his brand was built on positivity, on being the guy who brought light, laughter, and energy into the world. Watching that image unravel feels personal for the audience who grew up with him. But that's exactly why Brian's lawsuit hit differently. It's not about destroying someone. It's about confronting the system that allowed things like this to happen in silence for so long. Whether his claims hold up or not, he's forced a conversation that's long overdue. Because even if every accusation turns out to be false, it's made people realize how much power shapes what we see and what we don't. And that's the irony. Will Smith, the man who once symbolized transparency, inspiration, and authenticity, is now at the center of a story about secrecy, denial, and control. It's a complete reversal of everything his career stood for. The world's watching closely now, not just for legal updates, but for signs of accountability, for honesty, for change. Because at the end of the day, it's not only about guilt or innocence, it's about what happens next. Will Hollywood finally confront the way it protects its biggest players? Will audiences keep forgiving stars just because they loved their work? Or is this the moment people finally stop separating the art from the artist? Those questions are what make this case different. It's not just another celebrity headline. It's a reflection of the cultural shift happening right now. For decades, Hollywood controlled the narrative, deciding which stories were told and which ones vanished behind NDAs and settlements. But that control is slipping. The internet, the public, and independent voices are now the ones deciding which stories matter. And this one clearly does. So as the case unfolds, the world is left watching the same man who once inspired millions now standing under a spotlight he can't control. Whether he rises again or fades into the background will depend on more than just verdicts. It'll depend on how much truth the public believes they've already seen. And maybe that's the real power of this moment. It's forcing people to look past the celebrity glow and ask who gets protected and who pays the price. Because if Brian King Joseph's story is true, it exposes something bigger than any one actor. It reveals the machinery that turns silence into currency. And if it's not true, then it shows how fragile reputation has become, how fast a legacy can fall apart when even one story spreads. Either way, there's no going back to the old image of Will Smith, the one who could do no wrong, who symbolized discipline, family, and heart. That version of him lived in a world where audiences didn't question what went on behind the curtain, but that world is gone. Now every move, every word, every rumor is under the microscope. Because in the digital age, the court of public opinion never closes. And the truth, whatever it is, always finds a way to surface. Maybe not today, maybe not tomorrow, but it always does. So what do you think? Is this the beginning of another major reckoning for Hollywood, one that finally forces accountability at the highest levels? Or is it just another case of rumor, resentment, and a fallen icon trying to survive the storm? Drop your thoughts in the comments. I want to know what you believe really happened. And if you found this breakdown eye-opening, hit that like button, share this video, and make sure to subscribe so you don't miss the next chapter of this story. Turn on those notifications because we're just getting started, and this one isn't over yet. I'll see you in the next one.